Hey everyone, I'm Jack,
And I'm Alex.
and in today's video we're going to rank the levels and bosses of Doom 2016. After a 12-year hiatus, the Doom series made a grand return 2 console generations after Doom 3, with a totally revamped story mixed with a fast-paced combat system that, combined, gave way for millions of new fans, such as myself. ID Software and Bethesda did a masterful job over 9 years of development, in which the game was supposed to be Doom 4, then scrapped and completely redesigned from the ground up, finally ending with a modern, hell-themed reinterpretation of the originals, in which the combat, soundtrack by Mick Gordon, aesthetic design, and overall experience captures so perfectly.
While hard to look at without comparing it to its almost objectively superior sequel, Doom 2016 has an identity very much its own that's fun in a different way. Sometimes you just want to spam the super shotgun and vaporize things with siege mode, and 2016 is happy to oblige. We'll be doing a rare joint video wherein the levels and bosses are covered in one fell swoop. There are only 3 bosses, and just take our word for it, as much as we'd love to make money off another video, there is just no good way to drag out a 3 boss ranking and keep it entertaining. So be sure to stick around after we discuss our favorite level, since the video isn't done just then. Now that that's all explained and accounted for, sit back and enjoy as we rip and tear through the ranks.
Resops. I was seriously down on Doom 2016 fresh off of the high that is eternal, with resource operations serving as the nail in the coffin that made me quit the game in its entirety for multiple months until we decided we'd make this video. While it gives a face to Olivia Pierce, the game's main antagonist, and continues down the path of, well, nothing in terms of combat evolution outside of the mostly useless heavy AR, it did introduce the explosive zombie, which in this game is one of the most obnoxious and equally unnoticeable enemies throughout. No 2 rooms differ from each other in visual appearance or geometric design, with even the crane puzzle, of which I believe was intended to be fun, being plain boring. Gore nests do nothing to differentiate themselves, and while it is fun to endlessly slaughter with the base shotgun, this is the first instance in the early game where the lack of speed and intensity found right from the beginning of Eternal shows itself. Also, Alex's biggest gripe in maybe the whole game, he wanted me to mention this, is Hayden's notorious unskippable Argent speech that apparently makes Ultra Nightmare triple as miserable, excluding the boredom of the level itself. I do think I would have a bit more of a positive outlook on Resops if I didn't play Eternal before 2016, however, I did, and the cruise control pace this level runs on seriously hinders the minimal fun to be had from its generic design.
The UAC is the first level in the game and correspondingly has the least combat options. The pistol becomes worthless approximately 0 seconds into the game, so it all comes down to the shotgun for getting the job done. Doom is at its best when there are frantic combat situations demanding adaptation and good reflexes, which is directly counter to the design of this mission. Take Hell on Earth from Doom Eternal, a vastly superior first level that gives you far more combat option and enemy variety within the opening stage of the game. As is, you aren't doing much more here than running into demons' faces and blasting them off with no change in tactics. This is a good time to add that not being able to kill the possessed soldiers with one explosive shot drives me absolutely insane and makes the shotgun feel weak when it can't even take out fodder with ease. Art direction-wise, the surface of Mars is pretty much what you'd expect, dusty and red. It works well for the first level or 2, but the lack of distinct set pieces in the UAC majorly harms its memorability. Even on Nightmare, this level isn't likely to be the main cause of death, with that honor going to the wretched, one-shotting, imp-laden abomination that is Resops. While there are imps and soldiers here, there aren't many tricky arenas and the game rarely locks you in a particular room. The UAC is an average introduction and a below-average standalone level, granting it a spot in the lower ends of our list.
As the beginning of the game's climax arc, the Argent facility is fine. I dig its design, the setting and time of day were both great choices, although combat is sparse and chock full of fodder demons when major arenas do come by. The first gore nest is decent, but also very short and over well before I felt immersed in the fight. My favorite bit in the mission was Hayden's increasing anger over the Doomslayer's lack of care destruction of the Argent lens, eventually causing the total annihilation of the Argent tower and facility in the process. I'm glad he did, because I quite enjoyed the hell-devoured shell of the facility found later on, but even as the base level progresses to its last few rooms, the combat is minimal. I'd, of course, be remiss if I didn't mention that you unlock the super shotgun, although that giant blue arena to follow, if you can even call it that, was incredibly disappointing and didn't deliver as an introduction to the sheer power of the weapon. With the destruction and complete loss of Argent energy to close, the beginning of the end was decent, but lacked the high-flying combat necessary of a non-introductory level.
The Argent Tower was originally my least favorite level in the game for one reason: bugs. This level is chock full of glitchy movement and scuffed geometry, although I feel like it got patched at some point because my most recent run through was actually pretty smooth. The issues I had with clipping through elevators and off of spinning platforms are only as bad as they are because falling means instant death in this game, which is one of, if not the most questionable design choice in its entirety. On Ultra Nightmare, you have no idea how frustrating it was to lose a run that was 3 to 4 hours deep to an elevator issue out of your control. The tower isn't the only platforming. There's also that broken bridge in the beginning of the level full of imps who can all snipe like Carlos Hathcock. People rag on the assault rifle scope mod a lot, but I actually get it early purely to deal with this treacherous piece of shit segment. There are pros to the Argent Tower as well, however, such as the introduction of the much needed double jump and the debut of the Gauss Cannon, my favorite weapon in the series. God, I miss the Siege Mode mod. That leap of faith you have to make for it is the coolest secret in the game in my opinion, which doesn't hurt. The arenas are pretty easy given the generous power-up distribution in this stage, but that isn't to say that they aren't fun. The last one is the only instance of a time-based arena I can think of, which is something. If you ported this level into Doom Eternal's engine where falling doesn't equal death, it might be one of the coolest levels, but unfortunately its heavy platforming focus takes away from the otherwise enjoyable fights within.
If you've watched any of our Souls videos before, you'll know that both Alex and I are suckers for fire. The Foundry, while basically any UAC complex without the Meltdown aesthetic, felt both necessary to keep players engaged in the early game and unusually interactive compared to the preceding two levels. Shockingly, this is an addition to the UAC on Mars, as notably its vertical rise made the two feel in little to no relation at all. As you progress through the Foundry, you feel as if you're moving towards something. You have direction, which is a point few pre-destroyed Argent facility areas share, and all gore nests are well placed and their respective arenas complement the barrage of enemies thrown at you. With the reveal of Olivia Pierce's sinister motives, for the first time in the game, the story not only feels impactful, but intriguing, and while my overall compliments in the Foundry were fairly vague, that's only because it was muddled down due to it being the third level in the game. However, it was a standout for the first half of Doom and left me satisfied with my beating it.
The Advanced Research Complex is a level I'm really conflicted on and probably one of the hardest for me to rank. On one hand, it has this cool feeling of infiltrating a high security base and the fun of acquiring the awesome DFG. On the other hand, it has the most obnoxious missable secret in the entire game, which I don't think I have ever remembered to pick up on my first run through on any playthrough. I love a well-hidden secret as much as the next guy, but blocking you off from going back without reason just seems dickish and made to troll the player. As well as that, you get a nice little in-person conference with Samuel Hayden. It's a bit less dull than his ResOps tirade due to the larger walking space, but otherwise is still an unskippable snooze fest. They even managed to make a Berserk arena feel lackluster since the vertical layout of it counters the Berserk ability and leaves you frantically running around looking for demons to use your fists on. It's like the ripping and tearing equivalent of blue balls, with the two Mancubi and a smattering of imps often being the only victims. The latter half of the level is better though, especially the last arena. It's got a nice classic circle layout with some bridges and elevation changes to keep things interesting, but the standout part is the ending. Barons of Hell aren't all that scary if you know how to use Siege Mode, but I remember totally pissing myself on my first playthrough when two of them pulled up out of nowhere. Advanced Research Complex has a few well-designed fights, but these are offset by a host of problems that keep it from holding pace with better missions.
Right after I beat this mission, I audibly said to myself, hell yeah. The fact that the destroyed facility can hold its own as the level directly following Kattinger Sanctum is a statement in itself, although it just points out how much more exciting the game gets the longer you go along. After you return from Hell, you find that Hell has taken over Mars, although for a full-scale invasion there does feel to be a significant lack of high-level demons such as Barons or Mancubi that were seemingly at every other room in Kattinger. I do also have to mention that from the outside looking in, this is one of the best visuals in the entire series, although once you're actually in the midst of the facility it feels very similar to the original, mainly due to most of it being set outdoors rather than inside, with multiple areas of the facility still being completely intact. Once you eventually do get inside, you're introduced to Pinkies, who are nowhere near as bad as they are in Eternal, but still are fairly ridiculous at tracking, and if you look up Pinkies Doom 2016, the only search pop-up is Doom 2016 Pinkies Annoying, which should say well more than enough about them. Anyways, while I've seen multiple people, such as Alex for example, state how they dislike the Bridge Arena, I actually quite enjoyed this because of its unorthodox design, although the last gore nest in the wired off spherical sort of area preceding the Arc Tram was, like all others relative to Kattinger, very short and also not very challenging. However, this is the point where the game really set off for me, and I hold the destroyed Argent facility in high regard because of that.
The Lazarus Labs are the starting point of the game's events, which is pretty clear after one stroll down a hallway. Blood and guts everywhere. It really went all out with the carnage in this place. To be honest, I mostly think of this level as the one where you fight the Cyber Demon, but there's definitely more to it than that, steal the show as he may. There's one of the few appearances of the Dark Lord in Olivia's office, although he doesn't make a physical appearance here, so for all we know she was just chatting with the lingering spirit of the Bogdanovs or something. Tomato, tomato, really. A lot of people will tell you that the game gets dramatically easier after Kattinger's Sanctum, and I agree more or less, although I'll vouch that the Lazarus Labs gave me plenty of close calls on UN runs. Specifically that room with the messy Mancubus liposuction, I noticed things can get pretty dicey if you don't stay moving. All the arenas are pretty fun save for that circular one outside Olivia's office, which felt uninteresting. The layout reminded me of that obnoxious fight with the Harbinger from Halo Infinite, but way less miserable. Lastly, this level has this strange quirk where there's a loading screen halfway through when you take the elevator to Olivia's lab. I'm sure there's some developer side reason for this, but I've never heard a definitive answer as to what the deal with this is. Given we're talking bosses later in the video, I won't say much on the Cyber Demon, but know that we both like him a good deal and he carries this mission up a few spots.
If my third place ranking isn't indicative of how much I enjoyed this level, I'll leave it at that I had it higher than Kattinger Sanctum. For me, if you can't tell from the script, aesthetic is a huge part of what makes or breaks a level. Take the hint, this is an incredibly designed level on both a visual and progression perspective, so much so that those aspects well overshadow the already enjoyable and consistently difficult combat. All the indoor arenas, my favorite being the Twin Bloodpool one, have fantastic geometry to work with and feature a constant rise in scale of demons piling on the intensity. Each passing section leads you towards finding the yellow and blue skulls required to activate the door to the outdoor regions, in which the level only gets better. This is the best looking part of the game besides Titan's Realm, both are very similar in appearance, and the many Doom 2 callbacks, but mainly the remains of the Icon of Sin were really cool. Whereas most levels tend to fill in gaps with imps and zombies, Necropolis instead utilizes Mancubi and Barons of Hell, and even if one alone isn't inherently difficult, it makes the overall experience far more engaging than passively throwing a frag and getting on with your life. Of course, the level ends with the Hellguards, and, well, this is a ranking of the levels and bosses, so I won't go in depth on them, but they do close off the third to last level well, all things considered. The Necropolis is one of my favorite levels out of any in both 2016 and Eternal, with nothing in particular that jumps out as flawed.
Kattinger's Sanctum is the ultimate skill checkpoint. If you can beat this on whatever difficulty you're playing on, you can clear everything else. As the first Hell level, it introduces a host of new threats, such as the intimidating Barons of Hell and the Lost Souls, who, if ignored, can seriously mess you up. It's nice to finally get a change of scenery, too, trading the red dust of Mars for the, well, still red, but definitely distinct Halls of Hell. I'm a big fan of how Hell looks in 2016's Doom. I dig the random lightning storms and rugged feel. Even the arena terrain is more natural than the UAC Mars levels, with slopes and jagged surfaces permeating every room. I liked Doom Eternal's Hell levels as well, but I definitely somewhat missed the less refined Hell from 2016. My working theory is that this is just the backwoods boonies of the demon world, and Eternal had you running around the Hell equivalents of New York City and LA. That's not to say Kattinger's Sanctum is sparsely populated, because there is no shortage of bloody, brutal beatdowns to be given. It's pretty much non-stop combat and is, in most people's opinion, including my own, the hardest level in the game. The coolest part to me is that last arena, where suddenly the screen gets super red, which makes everything look way more threatening. It doesn't hurt that there's a handful of tricky enemies here too to earn that ominous red tint. The combat and visuals both stand out starkly against the consistent UAC aesthetic, making Kattinger's Sanctum one of the most memorable and iconic levels in Doom 2016.
With the destruction of Vega's core comes the true start of the endgame and one of the best examples of dystopian futuristic design I've ever seen in the process. The most obvious thing about Vega CP is that this is a vertically downwards area, creating unique combat not found anywhere else in the game. The Berserk Arena is a top 3 fight in Doom due to it being so open, although the hallways that follow are crammed with pinkies and shield soldiers and in turn severely kill the mood. As you can see, I had this as my 5th ranked area, and a big part of that was due to how claustrophobic the middle portion is. And that last f***ing arena. I died well over 5 times, and I'd like to say that luck is the only reason I survived. Whether you're static, moving all the time, going in and out of the tram in the various minor rooms, grab the speed boost. Why out of every possible upgrade is there a speed boost? No matter what you do, take, use, this is just crap. The geometry causes you to get stuck a bunch, and the choice to simply fill the room with as many heavy demons as possible is really mind-boggling. I do find Vega's destruction quite enjoyable, however, with his backup serving as a major player in Doom Eternal and eventually allowing for the grand reveal of Vega being the essence of the Father, creator of life, the Urdak realm, and maker race. As much as I dislike bits and pieces of this level, Vega's central processing was memorable, and I would like to say that it definitively is a world-class mission.
Never guessed by looking at the place, but Argent D'Nur was once Sentinel territory and just got annexed by Hell a ways back. They gave it a killer makeover since this is by far my favorite looking level in the game, discounting Vega's central processing. Hell up until now has just been fire and brimstone, but here they finally whip out the lava and all that good stuff. On a semi-related note, I can't be the only person who thought the lava on the floor would damage you if you walked over it. I didn't even know it was safe until this last playthrough I did, which was like my 30th or something. All the arenas are totally nuts, starting off with an awesomely designed Berserk-oriented room with stairs for easy elevation navigation. When I snag a Berserk, I expect to be able to teleport around like a madman and reduce everything to Gibbs before it runs out. This is how it's done. The other arenas are also pretty intense and are a good build-up to stabbing the wraiths and closing the well, although I remember thinking one of them has a weird amount of fodder demons. They sometimes feel a bit long, but they're large enough to merit a decent amount of time being spent in each one. I also like the evil Cacodemon placement in this early part of the level. This is the sort of trollish level design that is actually funny as opposed to missable collectibles. The Spider Mastermind is, well, okay, I guess. I don't hate it as much as Jack does, but it is very mediocre feeling. Argent D'Nur otherwise nailed what a finale should be and stands as the best Hell level other than our number 1 pick.
While I am surprised at how really underrated Titan's Realm is, that didn't make much of a difference to Alex and I, and without question, in all facets of level design, the darkest section of Hell has no competition as the best the game offers. Of course, I can't speak for the masses, but I can say that for me personally, Titans are the coolest thing in the Doom series. To get to go inside one is a dream, even more than fighting a Titan, and the interior design is just incredible. One thing I feel is missing from the combat in this game is vertical arenas. Most are wide, some even narrow, but all are generally on the same plane with a balcony here or a bridge there. However, the entirety of Titan's Realm is vertically scaled, and the fluidity of its open design makes for the best arenas in the game. I also really like the progression in this level, with tasks upon tasks required to open elevators, doors, and passageways with tons of variation in between, for example, poisonous goo. Is this annoying? Sure. But the design is made to be possible all the while difficult, and take how they limited the demon count in these sections to allow you to focus more on the platforming. Yes, this is just one example, but the entire mission is full of scenarios like these where clear care was taken to maximize the fun to be had with the design in question. And because of that care, there's not a single dull moment spent in the Titan's Realm, making it, without question, the best level in the game. That closes out our ranking on the areas, but we've still got 3 bosses to go over as well. Let's get into it with the most disappointing of the lot.
As we alluded to earlier, neither of us think very highly of the Spider Mastermind. Obviously, I get that at the time this was a soft reboot of the original games rather than a sequel, as it was retconned to be an Eternal. Of course, they wanted the final boss to be the same to please old fans. That's a perfectly understandable mindset, but it just looks goofy in newer graphics, and I wish they took some creative liberties with the original concept like they did with the Cyber Demon to make it more intimidating. After watching Olivia get zapped into mush and sink into an ominous blood puddle, I'd expect something really badass, but this just didn't do it for me. I've seen stuff like this in Australian nature documentaries. As for the gameplay, it's awkward as well. The Spider Mastermind just fires lasers periodically and occasionally graces you with easily avoidable scatter shots of energy balls. It doesn't feel very intense, and it's a rare case of a boss fight that gets easier over time. I actually did like this feature. It logically makes more sense, and there's something satisfying about watching the Mastermind devolve into a staggering mess. By the time you jam the BFG down its throat, you're basically putting it down. While it's not my favorite boss, and definitely not Jack's favorite, I'd say it's an average fight that's simply dwarfed in coolness by its competition.
While only a microcosm of the scale of bosses featured in games such as Dark Souls 2 and Cuphead, the latter system of a miserable finale to a relative to the game average boss to, as you'll see, an incredibly dynamic, fun, and intense number 1 is still there. Considering there's only 3 bosses compared to, well, 41, I'm not exactly sure whether that's a good thing or not, but for as a stated middle-of-the-road boss, I find the Hellguards right on the verge of memorably good, in part to both the fight itself and its importance with the discovery of the Crucible, one of Eternal's best mechanics. I think what hinders them the most for me is their design. On paper, the idea of a robotic being only given life through a parasite or some sort of life force integrating into its core is neat, but the bland, barf green color mesh and overall disinteresting design on all facets compared to a spider with a brain and a cybernetic demon leaves me forgetting about it altogether. While they all look like the giants from the underground bit in the Black Gulch, the Hellguards make up for aesthetic laziness through weapon and moveset variation, something I am very keen on when it comes to bosses like this. As well, there are 2 phases, the first with only 1 Hellguard, and the second a collective health bar featuring 2 more. Hellguard number 1 has a lot of elemental attack variety, namely in the 6-lane fire circle and electric balls, among other AoE attacks that are generally easy to strafe and capitalize on with a short burst of the super shotgun. Surprisingly, dealing with 2 at once over just 1 isn't that much harder at all, with both having different AIs, one being more passive and the other extremely aggressive. I absolutely commend how ID chose for both to share a collective pool of health over 2 separate health bars, which for one took off the potential stress of fighting 3 bosses in a row, but also made you focus on just the game itself over strategically deciding which one to take down first. The Hellguards are both levels above the Spider Mastermind and levels below the Cyber Demon, but even as a neutralizing in-between boss, they are exceptionally fun.
The Cyber Demon kicks f***ing ass. He starts off by catching even the Doomslayer off guard, grabbing him halfway through a dramatic door opening and ragdolling him into his playpen. The demons apparently fear the Slayer, but if the Cyber Demon actually does, he deserves an Oscar for his performance. The strategy is the same as it is for any big enemy in Doom 2016, rocket launcher and Gauss cannon weapon swapping, but even as a veteran who can dunk all over him, it still feels novel. The arena is always full of lasers, rockets, swipes, and whatever else, which definitely upholds the Doom mantra of always stay moving. And as brain-dead as it sounds, I pretty much always go nuts for any boss fight with multiple distinct phases where stuff gets more intense and flashy later. In other words, I'm the exact kind of guy the Dark Souls 3 DLCs were marketed towards. True to this time-honored Alex-pleasing formula, the Cyber Demon isn't done after getting his Argent accumulator yanked out, and instead is revived by a nice refreshing dose of evil Hell Lightning. He can no longer use that laser move, which is a bummer since I think it's his coolest one, but for people who hate the godly tracking that thing has, it could be a plus. He makes up for losing his Argent-based moves with some new Hell ones, like the Rock Corridor and some waves. It's like a prototype for the Gladiator jump rope move from Doom Eternal. I say prototype because, let's be honest, this thing is not hitting anyone with a spacebar and functioning brain synapses. A camp that sometimes even includes myself, embarrassingly enough. The finale to this grand showdown is nice and simple, bashing his noggin with his own tusk and making blood mist with one hit. I think this is my favorite boss fight id Software has ever made, mostly because it follows the shoot it until it dies mantra with no gimmicks to distract from the fun of the health bar whittling and attack dodging mayhem.
Thanks for watching, and we hope you enjoyed. Doom was a blistering return to mainstream gaming and moved the story as well as the gameplay to a point where its sequel could and did revolutionize the genre of shooters. I adore this game, and with it being on Xbox Game Pass as well as Eternal, the fact that I played both free of charge is a blessing. Subscribe if you haven't, and leave a like and comment on thoughts, game recommendations, or whatever you feel like. Be on the lookout for uploads every Wednesday, and otherwise, once again, thank you for watching. That's all for now. Deuces.